and platelets. So we're going to be talking about all those different components that you can find in the blood. This is like a glass vial. If you were to take out a human's blood and spin it down in a centrifuge, it will separate into components that we'll talk about. This slide just talks about blood is full of interest. We need it, obviously, to survive, but it makes you bruise, blush, induces cringe. Our arteries are flowing with it, our veins. It determines, there's a genetic component that is of interest. It has a lot of religious components. So it causes you harm if it's too thin or too thick. A lot of interesting things with the blood. So how does blood contribute to maintaining a steady internal environment? It's going to transport gases, carbon dioxide, oxygen. It's going to transport those. It's going to transport nutrients in the blood, plasma proteins, things your body needs to build proteins. It also transports hormones. Many of the hormones, hormones are actually specifically transported via the blood or in the blood. That's why hormones are very potent. If you induce something or you put something intravenously into your blood supply, you're going to feel the effects of that rather quickly. Blood also helps regulate your pH, so your acid level in your body and the temperature. We've talked about before, if you need to release some heat, your face might get flushed because the blood vessels are releasing that heat to the outside. And blood also provides protection. Two things, white blood cells with the immune system protection in there, and then clotting. If you cut yourself, there's a blood clotting mechanism or cascade that will happen to protect rapid blood loss. So you have about 5 quarts or about 5 liters of blood in your body at one time. Blood is viscous. It is resists flow a little bit. It's thicker. It's more dense than water. The pH of the blood is a little bit alkaline. It's between 7.35 and 7.45. That's the pH of the blood, and that needs to be maintained. This temperature of the blood is slightly warmer than your core body temperature. Okay, so here's a picture of that glass vial again. You can see the parts are labeled for you in this one. So a tube of anticoagulated blood is allowed to sit. So essentially, it's going to separate here. A cellular portion will precipitate out, meaning leave the liquid part, and it will go to the bottom. So the cells, specifically the red blood cells, are in the bottom. They're the heaviest part of the blood, and they make up about 45% of that overall blood volume. What will go to the middle, based on weight, will be the white blood cells and the platelets. They'll form what is known as the buffy coat. You can see it there. And then the largest percentage of your blood volume, about 55%, is the liquid part of your blood, known as the plasma. You can see it's kind of a light yellowish color there. This is just another image of, more specifically, of what's included in the blood. So this is your body weight. About 8% of your weight of your body right now is due to your blood, and 55% is that plasma. Within that plasma, we see proteins, 7%. This includes different proteins that we will talk about, blood clotting proteins. Albumin is a globulin, and fibrinogen we'll talk about. Water is about 91.5% of your overall plasma content, and then other things, other solutes within the plasma, electrolytes, nutrients, gases, waste products. You can actually donate plasma for money, specifically plasma. What they'll do is they'll take out your blood and they'll separate it into red blood cells, platelets, white blood cells, and then plasma. They'll keep the plasma, and then they'll put everything else they took out of you back into you. The formed elements, so these are your cells, the cellular portions. It can be divided into your red blood cells. And there's about 4.8 to 5.4 million at any one time. White blood cells, about 5,000 to 10,000. So white blood cells are less numerous. And these are the different types of white blood cells: neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. And then you have about 150,000 to 400,000 platelets per microliter of blood. That's what this is down here, per microliter. Plasma, and this is just a detailed picture of what I've already talked about. Why is it important? It contains important clotting proteins, water, and then other important solutes, nutrients, electrolytes that you need to survive. Red blood cells. Another name for your red blood cell count is called your hematocrit. The normal mass is between 40 to 45% total blood volume. That's made up of just specifically red blood cells. Females down here, hematocrit is a little lower than males. The amount of red blood cells essentially is lower in females. This is about the range of normal hematocrit levels or numbers of red blood cells comparing females to males. So males have more red blood cells. White blood cells, and we're going to talk about the 5 different types in more detail in part 2, but main job, immune response to protect your body, and they have specific varying functions among them. And you can see the percentage is different depending on the white blood cell. But you should know red blood cells outnumber white blood cells about 700 to 1. Megakaryocytes. Okay, so during blood cell development, there's a cell called a megakaryocyte. It's a huge cell. And then it will splinter, break into about 2,000 to 3,000 fragments or pieces. This still happens in your red bone marrow. That's where your blood cells are formed. When it breaks into those pieces are now referred to as a cellular component called a platelet. And platelets are involved in blood clotting. We have more platelets than white blood cells, but they don't live very long, only 5 to 9 days. And they really don't have much mass. In this, underneath the microscope, we can see red blood cells here, the majority. Here's a white blood cell, here's a white blood cell. These little specks right here, these are the platelets. They contain granules. Once they're released from the platelets, they promote that blood clotting when you need your blood to clot. Blood cell formation. To form your cells in your blood, it's called hematopoiesis. And this happens, we already learned about where it happens. It happens in the red bone marrow. So here's a picture of somebody getting bone marrow harvested from their pelvic bone right here into that red bone marrow. And the red bone marrow contains these pluripotent bone stem cells. Blood cells will mature in different places. They'll either mature in that bone marrow itself or in the lymphoid tissue. This figure shows the blood cell lineage, essentially the different routes that pluripotent blood stem cells can take to become the specific kinds. This is the progenitor of all the other red bone marrow cells, meaning it's the beginning cell. It comes at first to begin with. So a cell could take go down this myeloid stem cell route, or it could be split up into the lymphoid stem cell. So this is one of the specific steps it will take to become more differentiated, more specialized. On the myeloid, we can see over here, it will lead to a specific red blood cell. Notice, this is called a pro-erythroblast. A reticulocyte is another name for immature red blood cell. Before a red blood cell matures, or on the path to becoming a mature red blood cell, it has to kick out the nucleus, which is important in what we're talking about next here. Here is the pathway to become a platelet. Over here are 4 of the white blood cells. We all see a mast cell here. The monocyte can become a macrophage. That's what that arrow means. Over to the lymphoid cell lineage, these are your B cells and your T cells and your natural killer cells. We're going to talk more about those when we get to the immune system, but T cell is a type, or a lymphocyte is a type of white blood cell, and they're specific. 2 categories, B cells, T cells. Specifically, the part of hematopoiesis or cell our blood cell production, specifically to red blood cells, is called erythropoiesis. So erythropoiesis is the process of producing red blood cells, RBCs. Erythrocytes is another name for a red blood cell. What happens is when your body is deficient in oxygen, it's called hypoxia, okay? You don't have enough oxygen. The kidneys eventually are going to release, they're going to know this, they're going to know that your body's lacking oxygen, and they're going to release a hormone. Your kidneys are going to release a hormone, and that name of that hormone is EPO, or erythropoietin. This hormone is going to go into the blood's going to circulate to your red bone marrow. The red bone marrow then is going to be triggered because of that hormone to produce more red blood cells. At first they're immature, and then they will go through that process of maturation. There are synthetic forms of erythropoietin that we will talk about and that can induce red blood cell formation, but the natural way is when your kidneys release this hormone called erythropoietin. Make sure you watch this video right here. It's a very good video that goes over erythropoietin production. Red blood cells, they're shaped. They're biconcave discs. They're like little frisbees. Like I said before, the mature red blood cells do not have a nucleus. And they don't actually have any protein-making machinery, so they don't have the ribosomes, the roughy R, the Golgi apparatus. So they don't live very long. They kick out that nucleus to make more room to hold oxygen, actually. And their average lifespan is about 120 days from their form to when they die. And they're designed specifically to carry that oxygen to the parts of the body that need it. The reason why they're shaped like a biconcave disc or little frisbees, it increases the surface area for oxygen to be exchanged with carbon dioxide. It also gives them a high, what's called oxygen carrying capacity, and it's just as it sounds, the ability of that to carry oxygen. So you can have a high oxygen carrying capacity or a lower. They don't have any mitochondria, so they don't use any energy or oxygen they carry, so that's good. Their shape allows them to stack up on each other as well, to fit through tight capillaries. Their shape is very important to their function. The rate of how fast red blood cells are produced is measured by counting the reticulocytes, or immature red blood cells, in peripheral or anywhere in your blood circulation. So lab techs will count the number of these immature red blood cells, reticulocytes, and if you have a low retic count, that indicates your level of erythropoiesis is not as high as it should be. And if it's above 2%, that means you're producing more red blood cells than you should be. So it's a high rate of erythropoiesis. Normally, in circulation, 1 to 2% of your red blood cells are those immature cells. So they'll count that. If they find too many of this kind, the pro-erythroblasts, these really immature ones, they should really never see those there. That could indicate leukemia, a type of blood cell cancer. So lab techs have to look for certain percentages of all these erythroblasts, reticulocytes, red blood cells to indicate or diagnose certain diseases or problems. This is the last slide here for Part 1 notes. Hemoglobin is the protein that resides in the red blood cells. And hemoglobin looks like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. It has 4 iron or heme portions. This is where this oxygen specifically binds to in the red blood cell. So every hemoglobin molecule here has 4 spots to hold 4 molecules of oxygen. So that it contains a heme portion and an iron portion. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that protein, and there's many hemoglobin molecules in every red blood cell. And that is the end of Part 1.